though, was repairing old cars. And people said, why'd you do that? Well, it was fun. And then I got stuck on old Volvos. And the Swedes love me. I mean, Volvo, I'm one of the greatest spokesmen Volvo's ever had. When I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I lived at Fort Myer Mansion. But the mansion had behind it 3 garages. So I could fill the garages with old broken Volvos. And it was away from the house, so my wife didn't have to see it. And people would actually come to my house looking for parts. It drove my wife crazy. They'd knock on the door. Yes, is the general home? I need a starter for a 66 122. No, he's not home. He's down in the garage. Oh, and so I had a lot of fun. And people say, well, why? Even during the Desert Storm? Yeah. During the Panama? Yes. Well, why? Because it settled my mind in that when I had a problem with one of these old cars, I could think about the problem and analyze it and say, it's an electrical problem. No, it's a fuel problem. No, it's an airflow problem. But think it all through in my mind, and then without touching the car, coming to the 1 or 2 things it had to be, and then fixing one, see if it worked, and fixing the other, and it worked. But unlike most of the things I had to do all day long, there was a solution.
Yeah, I understand that.
And it was a solution that you could logically get to, which was not generally the case in politics, diplomacy, or even in the bureaucracy of the military. You have to have something that takes you out of the problems of the day or the pattern of the day. And if you can't have fun with yourself, then that's not good. I don't want to be measured as an African American. I want to be measured on the basis of my performance. I joke with my audiences sometimes. You know, people call me the Black Secretary of State. And I laugh and say, is there a white one somewhere? Like, what did I miss? Where is he? I said, no, I'm the Secretary of State who happens to be black. And I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of it because of all who went before me that made it possible. But don't try to typecast me as a black anything. I'm what I am, and I also happen to be black.
It seems incomprehensible to me that earlier in your life, because of the color of your skin, you couldn't even eat at certain lunch counters.
I entered the Army 10 years after Truman desegregated the Army, and 5 years after his orders were finally fully implemented. And so I came in at a time when integration was the big thing in the Army, and the Army was the most socially conscious institution in America with respect to desegregation and integration. And they said to me when I came in 1958, we're only going to measure you by performance. And if there have been elements in your history or in the history of the Army's experience with blacks that suggest that we have been penalizing blacks, we're going to take affirmative action to deal with that. But you'll go as high as you can on the basis of performance. And in my case, it took me all the way to the chairmanship of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I never forgot that if I had come in 5 or 10 years earlier, I never would have become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But those who served before me, going back 300 years of black military history in this country, they knew that even though the country would not serve them, they would serve the country. And the reason for that was, if we can prove that we are good soldiers and that our blood is as red as anyone else's, and we will die for the country, and we can be an equal of a white in battle, then sooner or later, it will change. And so I've never forgotten that I did not get where I was without them having done that, in the knowledge that they never could have become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or anything else. But all they could do is chip away, chip away, chip away. And they did, and created conditions that allowed me to rise. I am, first and foremost, a product of the community in which I grew up in the family.
In the Bronx.
Community in the Bronx. Strong family. A family that gave to all the cousins, and my extended family of cousins, 2 things: expectations and a sense of shame. We have expectations for each and every one of you. We did not come to this country on banana boats, which is how they got here. We didn't go through Ellis Island. We didn't work minimum wage jobs in the garment industry so that you could do nothing with your life. So don't even talk about going to school or not going to school. There's nothing to discuss here. You're going to school, and you're going to go to college too. You don't want to go to college? We don't care. You're going to college. Expectations. And we were all raised saying we don't have any choice. These crazy people are not going to let us do anything but something with our lives. And then the second thing I had was a sense of shame. And the sense of shame said, look, you are of this family, therefore do not shame the family. And whenever we failed in this regard or did something that was unacceptable, it was not a beating. They never laid a hand on me. It was, you shame the family. Beat me. I'd rather you beat me. Please, don't give me that guilt trip. It was like getting 20 pounds of guilt put on your back. And it was terrible.
You say that optimism is a force multiplier.
Right. Yeah. You always have to show up thinking the problem is solvable. We'll fix it. We'll find a way through. In the military, we're taught to constantly look for force multipliers in the terrain, in the weather, in logistics, in command and control, or in brute force. So you're always looking for something that multiplies the effect, that always gives you a 2x, a 3x, or 4x over what your opponent is expecting. And what I discovered over the years is that another force multiplier that is not in the field manuals is optimism, perpetual optimism, that says to the organization and to the followers, we're going to make it. And it's infectious.
Yeah.
If the leader shows up every morning and she has thought through the problem and has started to see a way through, then that kind of optimism and that sort of perpetual optimism is infectious with the rest of the organization. If it's false optimism or you're just spinning them, you lose that within 24 hours because they see it isn't for real. This also ties into another one of my little rules. That is, things always kind of look better in the morning. So, no matter how bad a day you're having, get a good night's rest, and things always look better in the morning. That's the belief I have, whether it turns out to be correct or not. You should never start a day thinking everything is going to be bad as it was yesterday. It's a bad personal habit to have. So always be optimistic about what the next day will bring. Okay, we didn't get it done today. Today was a bad day. Tomorrow will be better. Yeah. One of the techniques I use, both as chairman and as Secretary of State, is that every morning I have a staff meeting. It was a meeting at which, hey, here we are, families gathered. Tell me what's going on. Each and every one of you, tell me what you need to tell me. Don't do show and tell. Don't talk just because you're there. Tell me something I need to know. And it'll only last 30 minutes, never more. So you can count on it only being 30 minutes. More often than not, it only lasted 10 minutes. We went around the table quickly. I looked in all of their eyes, and I could tell who was having a good day or a bad day, who was in trouble or not in trouble, by the way in which they looked back at me. And I especially needed these kinds of meetings when I was in trouble. When one of the newspapers has just called me a jerk, an idiot, an incompetent, or what have you, or something terrible had just happened, it was so important for my staff to see me that morning with the whole world falling on me, to walk in and say, hey guys, how are we doing? Now, here's what we're going to do today. Anybody got any questions? What's on your mind? When you do that, people essentially vest confidence in you. They trust you more. They trust you because you are taking them into your life and into your confidence. So the essence of all leadership, the essence of all interpersonal action between leaders and followers has to rest on a solid foundation of, I trust you. I'm with you. And you only get people in that environment when you have given them clear goals, when you have been a good example to them, when they can see you believe in what it is you want them to believe in. You have communicated it with passion, and you've inspired them. And they know you are leading them ethically and honestly, and it's for the purpose of accomplishing the organizational mission and not for your own self-aggrandizement, your promotion, or your personal benefit. It's for the organization. And when you get to that point, then you have developed the conditions of trust that make you a high-performing organization. Nobody should want war or welcome war. it is a terrible thing, and it is the failure of diplomacy, and it's the failure of politics. It is the ultimate competition between human beings, but paid in blood, terrible cost. I have been characterized as the reluctant general because every time I have had to advise a president or a Secretary of Defense about these matters, I was always trying to find a way to avoid war. And I'm glad I'm called a reluctant general. And I will always be a reluctant general. I always want to see war avoided if possible. I was criticized at the end of the Gulf War because with President Bush and with Mr. Cheney and all the others, we brought the war to an end. And somebody, you should have kept fighting. These were warriors who thought it was going to be a much worse war, many more casualties. When the casualties were low, suddenly they were encouraging us to keep killing. And I said to the president, Mr. President, what do you want to do? And he said, if we have accomplished the mission, which was get the Iraqis out of Kuwait, why should we keep killing? And I said, I'll talk to Schwarzkopf. I did, and we stopped it. And we're criticized for years afterwards because we didn't want to kill any more young people. As a 25-year-old infantry captain, I went to Vietnam for the first time in 1962. And there I was, I'm an infantry officer, graduated from Fort Benning. Boy, this is good. We're going to save democracy and we're going to protect these people. And then we were going down the jungle trail one afternoon, and suddenly, for the first time, I was under live fire. All of my Vietnamese colleagues who I was serving with started shouting and screaming. Somebody had been hit. And so I ran to the front of the column, and there, laying in stream bed, was a young Vietnamese soldier, and he was dead. And we wrapped him up in a poncho, and in those days, there was no medevac helicopters around, so we had to carry him for several days. And I'll still never forget sitting there, getting ready to go to sleep, saying to myself, my God, the same thing's going to happen tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. And this is not a game. I remember my second time in Vietnam. I was a battalion executive officer, and the battalion got hit badly. And I flew out in a helicopter to help bring the casualties back. And I was sitting in the helicopter, and there was one dead soldier on the floor in front of me, but there was another black soldier who was alive, and I was holding him. But I could see the wound that he had was grievous. And he had tourniquets on, but he was bleeding from torn arteries. And he just kept looking up at me with his eyes becoming more and more blank, but staring at me, silently begging. And there's nothing I could do for him except hold him. And he died. You don't forget that. And anybody who wants to tell me that this is something we should seek or we shouldn't fight against with every drop of energy that we have, every drop of blood that we have, to avoid these kids. And it's not just our kids. It's the kids on the other side. And they're all our kids. I mean, the Creator put them all on earth. And we should do everything we can to avoid that kind of crisis.
Now, General, you've led in a lot of different settings, and I think a lot of our listeners would be quite interested in knowing, how does leadership change on the actual battlefield?
Everything gets compressed. You don't have the same kind of time. You have to respond much more quickly because you're in a battle. But you must use the same process of analysis, even though time is compressed. What's the problem? Analyze it quickly. What's the enemy doing? What's my reaction to what he's doing? How do I issue the instructions? And have I forgotten anything? As we say in the military, no plan survives first contact with an enemy. Even the greatest of all strategists must occasionally take into account the presence of an enemy. Which means, we've got this plan and it's just terrific. And look, this is terrific. But there's an enemy out there who's also been planning and also has been analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. This really puts the heat on you. And you have to have not only, I think, a good mind to sort through all of that and a good staff to help you, but you have to have a certain instinct that says, can't be. Great story about General U.S. Grant during the Civil War in the final siege around Petersburg, and somebody woke him up one morning, one night, and said, General Grant, we've just gotten